When Fat Joe and Jadakiss teamed up to launch their new podcast, no one expected that one of the oldest tricks in the hip-hop book would launch them to the top of the charts. 3 weeks after starting their show, it was already #1. And the wildest part, it wasn't because of some viral guest or crazy controversy. It was because of something as random and hilarious as Joe Budden seats. Now, if you're wondering what that even means, you're not alone. It all started when Fat Joe told a story about going to a Knicks game and making a joke about Joe Budden sitting in the seats behind the floor seats. That little jab sparked a chain reaction. Joe Budden heard about it and did what Joe does best. He responded. At first, he was cool about it. He even showed Fat Joe some love. But then he flipped the switch. Joe reminded everyone exactly who. He is saying that not only is he richer than Fat Joe, but if he wanted to, he could be watching the Knicks game from Africa and still be worth more. That's classic Joe Budden. Part philosopher, part flexer. Joe went on to explain his whole vibe. He said he's not at Knicks games to show off or to be seen. He's not there sitting in some labels comp seats. He's there because he's a true fan. He said he bought his own seats, not because of status, but because he wanted to. He even took it a step further and said of being seen isn't the goal. He's not out here trying to be buddy-buddy with rappers for clout. Joe made it clear he stands on his own. And that's exactly why Fat Joe used his name to get attention. Joe didn't hold back. He made it very clear that he doesn't even know what Joe Budden seats means, but if it's supposed to be some kind of insult, then the joke doesn't land. In fact, he flipped it back around, saying if he's sitting behind someone who makes less than him, then it's probably by choice. He's the one enjoying the popcorn with his girl. He even said that if he was sitting outside on a lawn chair watching the game on his phone, it shouldn't matter. His money speaks louder than any seat in the building. Even though Joe kind of brushed it off and said it was a non-issue, Fat Joe still got what he wanted. The attention was already on him. On their latest podcast episode, Fat Joe tried to walk back his comment in a joking way. He told Joe Budden it was all love, even though he kind of admitted to violating, clowning, and disrespecting him. It was a classic case of throwing a jab and then acting like it was all fun and games. Fat Joe told Joe Budden he didn't mean it like that, but come on, we all know what he was doing. Jadakiss jumped in on the fun too. He said he didn't even want to go to Game 6 of the Knicks playoff series because he didn't want to end up in the Joe Budden seats. That's how fast the joke spread. It went from being a simple podcast story to a full-on punchline that people were already using. Jadakiss laughed about not getting floor seats and said he felt like a sucker sitting in the second row. Fat. Joe tried to tell him those were still great seats, but the joke had already landed. They even brought up a past All-Star game where Jadakiss was seated way off to the side. Fat Joe said he fought for him to get better seats because he felt like it was a violation. Meanwhile, celebrities like Adele were courtside, and he wasn't having it. He argued that Jada should have been down there with the A-listers. That story was just more fuel for the fire. It showed that seating arrangements at games in the rap world aren't just about comfort, they're about status. But now Joe Budden's name is forever tied to this joke, and he knows it, even though he tried to stay above it and said the whole thing was a non-starter. The internet already grabbed onto it. Now Joe Budden seats is a real thing. People are going to be throwing that joke around for years. That's the cost of being a public figure with a sharp tongue. Sometimes, even when you win, you still give your opponents the momentum they need. It's a funny situation, but there's something smart about how Fat Joe played it. He took a small comment, turned it into a podcast moment, got a response from a huge name like Joe Budden, and rode that wave all the way to the top of the podcast charts. Whether or not you think Fat Joe was being sneaky or just having fun, you have to admit, it worked. The buzz around their show is real, and that little joke was a big reason why. Of course, Joe Budden has been in this game for a long time. With over 800 podcast episodes under his belt, he knows how these things go. He's seen people try to ride his name before, but this time, it hit different. These weren't just random newcomers. Fat Joe and Jadakiss are legends, and they're entering a space that Joe Budden helped shape. So while he might not see them as direct competition yet, it's clear he's keeping an eye on them. That's where things get interesting, because even though Fat Joe and Jadakiss are the new kids on the block when it comes to podcasting, they've got stories for days. Between the two of them, they've lived through almost every major chapter of hip-hop history. If they start getting consistent with their episodes, if they really open up and start sharing behind-the-scenes stories the way Joe Budden did during his famous Views rant on Drake, they could easily become one of the top urban podcasts out. Right. Now they haven't even tapped into their full potential. Fat Joe hasn't even leaned into his massive Latino fan base yet. And they've been doing all this without any big-name guests. But imagine if they start bringing people on. Imagine if they start pulling from their decades of music industry experience and really start spilling some of those secrets. The sky's the limit, but they gotta stay consistent. That's always the key. Podcasts don't blow up overnight unless you've got something special. And even then, you have to keep that momentum going. If they slow down, if they get too comfortable, Joe Budden will be right there with another one of his infamous rants. Possibly even a freestyle, mocking them as another one bites the dust. This whole situation started with a simple joke about seats at a basketball game, but it turned into something way bigger. It became a moment that highlighted how powerful podcasting is in today's culture. One comment led to a viral response, and that response gave new life to a brand new show. That's the power of names, platforms, and timing. Fat Joe used Joe. Budden's name to light a fire. Joe Budden responded and accidentally added fuel to it. And now the internet is running wild with it. Whether or not the Joe Budden seats joke sticks around for years, the message is clear. In the world of podcasts and hip-hop, the game is always changing. You never know what's going to take off. Sometimes it's not a diss track or a viral video. Sometimes it's just a well-placed joke about courtside seats. And when that joke gets turned into content and that content gets reactions, the whole machine kicks into gear. Joe Budden may have tried to brush it off, but even he knows what happened. He gave his competition exactly what they wanted, attention. And in this space, attention is everything. So now we wait and see what Fat Joe and Jadakiss do next. Will they keep the momentum going? Will they bring more guests, more stories, more fire? Or will this be one of those moments that fades out after the buzz dies down? Either way, one thing is for sure, the podcast game just got a lot more interesting. And if you're Joe Budden, even with all the money, the fame, and the history, you still have to watch your back. Because even a joke about seats can turn into a headline.